Alright, we are live, ladies and germs. And yes, this review should have come last week, but I've been procrastinating really badly, so I apologize for that. And I apologize for the cat in the background. She is majorly in heat right now. And I'm not letting her outside because I can't afford any more kitties. I got enough as it is. But we're going to be talking about the very controversial British Grand Prix. If I have time, I'll try to get into the Hungarian Grand Prix because there were some shenanigans that happened in that race as well. But first we got to talk about what was the big storylines from the previous week at the British Grand Prix and what happened afterwards, which was a bunch of insanity. So let's go ahead and get into it. This is the fuel. What's happening, ladies and germs? This is the Packerman, and welcome to today's edition of the Fuel, where we are going to be talking about the 2021 British Grand Prix. Admittedly, something that I should have done last week, but in some ways I'm actually kind of glad that I waited because of some stuff that actually happened that we learned about on Thursday in regards to what Red Bull did. So we're going to be getting into all that. So this is our 103rd episode ever of the Fuel. But of course, the big thing coming out of this was Lewis Hamilton. Let's go ahead and get into the hit storylines. Lewis Hamilton scoring his 8th British Grand Prix victory, which ties a record for the most at a single Grand Prix. And this, of course, was his 99th career Formula One victory. But of course, the whole storyline surrounding this race was, of course, the crash between himself and Max Verstappen at the Copse corner, which sent Verstappen careening off the track into the tire barriers and out of the race at a staggering 51 Gs, which was the impact. That's how strong the impact was. He suffered an impact of 51 Gs in that crash. So it's a great thing that he was able to climb out under his own power. He was checked and released from a local hospital. So that was good to see because that was a very scary incident. But the question that was on everybody's mind all throughout that race and afterwards is the title of this episode. Was it intentional? And oh, by the way, this was also the first race weekend with the new sprint race format. I mean, I didn't bother watching it. I mean, what was the point? I mean, it was basically a qualifying race, basically, where the winner got 3 points and got the pole position for the race. So they're going to do it 2 other times this year. The first one was the British Grand Prix. Sprint qualifying. What were the other ones? Let's go ahead and see. The first one was at the British Grand Prix. So the other two races have not been announced yet, but Monza is widely understood to be in the running for one of them. Okay. Interesting. So we know that the British Grand Prix was one of the first, was the first one for the new sprint format. Alright. I mean, I think it's kind of pointless. I think qualifying is fine as it is, but that's just me. It does award a few more points. The podium finishers in the sprint race get 3, 2, and 1. And the top 3 finishers, I believe, were Verstappen, who are in the pole, and then Hamilton, and then Bottas, I believe. So that increased Verstappen's point lead to 33 over Hamilton. And a lot of people were like, "Oh, was Hamilton getting desperate? You know, did he wreck Verstappen intentionally?" It's a very spicy topic during the past week before the Hungarian Grand Prix. But we're going to be getting into my personal analysis of what happened and do I think it was intentional or not. But we'll get into that when we get into it. But first, pretty busy week in terms of headlines for Formula One this past week. First up, Lando Norris during a football match, soccer for us in the States, he was attending a championship match between England and Italy. I think it was the UEFA Champions League. It was a pretty big deal, and Italy ended up defeating England in penalty kicks. And the English fans were not very happy and proceeded to start a riot after the match was over. And during the course of that riot, Lando Norris was mugged by someone, and he ended up having his Rolex watch stolen, which I think is pretty fucking bullshit. I mean, why the fuck anybody would want to do that is beyond me. I mean, if you do that to someone, you're pretty much a fucking scumbag. I hope they caught the son of a bitch and threw him, in the back of the meat wagon, because it's like, why the fuck would you do something like that? That's just ridiculous. Thankfully, it didn't really affect Norris's performance in the British Grand Prix. He ended up 4th, I believe. And once again, I apologize for the fucking cat. I need to get her fixed in the worst possible way. But, yeah. Some pretty stupid bullshit right there. Next up, we have yet another Grand Prix that ended up being canceled. The Canadian Grand Prix was canceled earlier this season and was replaced with the Turkish Grand Prix. But now, the Australian Grand Prix has been canceled as well. Due to Australia's government instituting quarantine measures, because COVID is still a thing, especially with the Delta variant now making the rounds. Let me look this up real quick and see what the exact reason was. Why was it? Okay, the Australian Grand Prix Corporation, in conjunction with the Victorian Government and Formula One today, announced the 2021 Formula One Australian Grand Prix has been cancelled due to restrictions and logistical challenges relating to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. So there you go. So the Australian GP has been cancelled for a second straight year due to COVID-19. So yeah, that's awesome. And they even scheduled it for the end of this year to try to avoid the race being canceled, and yet it was canceled anyway. So now the question is, will there be a replacement race for the Australian Grand Prix? Because now, because earlier this year the Canadian Grand Prix, like I said, it was cancelled and was replaced with the Turkish Grand Prix. But now, what's going to replace the Australian Grand Prix? Because the FIA made it clear that they are going to try to get the full 23 races in. 23 rounds of Formula 1 in 2021, which is absolutely insane. It's the most rounds that's ever been held in a Formula 1. Give me 1 second here. So I'm trying to look something up here. Season. So yeah, the Australian Grand Prix was set to take place on November the 21st. Pretty damn late in the year. But even then, they still had to cancel it. There's some concerns about running the Japanese Grand Prix. Don't forget that the Olympics are going on at the moment, and they're being held mostly without fans due to COVID still being a thing over there. So yeah, the Singapore Grand Prix has been canceled due to COVID, the Canadian Grand Prix due to COVID, and the Australian Grand Prix due to COVID. Now, one Grand Prix that's still on the rounds that they might replace Australia with is the Chinese Grand Prix, because it shows that the Chinese Grand Prix has only been postponed. It was originally scheduled for April the 11th, but of course it was postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. They might choose to schedule the Chinese Grand Prix for the November 21st date. Of course, I don't know what the weather is like over there in November, but that's certainly a possibility. Or they could do what they did with Red Bull Ring and do another doubleheader at another racetrack. At this point, they haven't really said anything at the moment. It is still to be announced. So, and we haven't heard anything since the cancellation of the Australian Grand Prix, so so we have absolutely no idea what the fuck's gonna happen there. But keep the ear to the ground and see what happens. But right now, I wouldn't be surprised if the Chinese Grand Prix was slotted into that date, because it's still showing as postponed and not canceled. So if they were to run the Chinese Grand Prix this year, they could probably slot it into that slot right there, depending on what the weather is like. Yo! Quit that. What's your problem? Lord. Need to get you fixed, cat. And yes, you too. I have 2 cats that are in heat right now. So you can imagine how annoying this is. But the Australian Grand Prix is not the only one that might be in danger of being postponed, possibly. Belgian Grand Prix in jeopardy. Notice the question mark I have there. The reason why I'm posing this question, and it's actually coming up at the end of August after the summer break. The reason why I'm posing this question is because Belgium and Germany in the last couple months have suffered from some record-breaking floods in both of their countries. And unfortunately, the floods in Belgium happened to reach Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. And there were some images online of the grandstands being absolutely flooded. From what I heard, that there was some damage to the racetrack itself being washed away. So whether or not Spa is going to be ready for the Belgian Grand Prix at the end of this current month, which is now August, remains to be seen. or whether or not they would move it to a different track. I know Belgium's got a couple of different tracks that have hosted Formula One, but Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps has always been kind of like the classic circuit. It's, I think, the longest track on the circuit at over 4 miles. So, and it's always presented a very, very unique challenge in Formula One. So it'd be a bit of a shame if the race at Spa was canceled or moved over to a different track. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But it's definitely a question I'm posing, considering all the flooding that Belgium and Germany have suffered this year. So now we come to what was the next one? Oh, right. We'll get to that in a minute. So now we come to the Hamilton-Verstappen collision analysis and what I think of what happened in that turn. Now, obviously, I'm not going to show any footage of it, mainly because the FIA is kind of a prick when it comes to people showing footage of their races or even just still images. I mean, they're pretty anal about that, even though it can be considered fair use under United States law. So, but for the sake of my channel, I'm going to refrain from showing any images or video footage of the incident. And besides, you can watch it online. I mean, they have it on their YouTube channel anyways, so you can look at it yourself. And I've reviewed the incident quite a few times, and basically, from what I could tell, the two of them were racing really hard. Hamilton actually got a good start and was challenging Verstappen early on. And I think the reason why he was pressed to get by Verstappen was because the fear was if he wasn't able to get by him at that point in time, he wasn't going to get by him at all unless, you know, there was some crazy pit strategy. So there was some pretty hard racing going on, and then when they came to Copse Corner, Hamilton ducked to the inside. Looked like Verstappen tried to block him a little bit, forced him down way to the inside, and then as they came to Copse Corner, Hamilton basically pushed up the track into Verstappen's right rear, which knocked the right rear tire off of the wheel and sent Verstappen's car crashing into the tire barriers. Now, obviously, this caused a massive firestorm online, bigger than any I've seen in Formula One to date. And there were some people, particularly in the Red Bull camp, that made complete asses out of themselves. Christian Horner, who is, I think, the team principal for Red Bull, was immediately calling for Lewis Hamilton to be suspended for at least one race. And today I'm like, dude, shut the fuck up. Okay? I mean, you're nothing but a fucking prima donna as it is. I mean, people accuse Lewis Hamilton of being a prima donna at times, which, I mean, he does complain quite a bit. But, I mean, Christian Horner, I mean, he's prima donna personified. I mean, calling for, you know, Lewis Hamilton to be suspended for a race. I mean, you would certainly like that, wouldn't you? I mean, I know you like sucking Verstappen's asshole, but, I mean, let's be completely real here, okay? Let's try to be biased in this thing. And, of course, you know, Verstappen, he said he was not very happy about, you know, the way Hamilton conducted himself when he won the race, you know, celebrating. Well, of course he's going to celebrate, Max. It's his home Grand Prix. What the fuck you think is going to happen? And they even said that they weren't going to celebrate if they found out that you were injured. But as soon as they learned that you were not injured in any way, shape, or form, you know, then yeah, they can celebrate. And it's his home Grand Prix. And don't even try to tell me that you would have done the exact same fucking thing at the Dutch Grand Prix. If the roles were reversed at the Dutch Grand Prix and the same thing happened, you would be doing the exact same thing, dude. So don't even start with that shit. What do you want, huh? Oh, shit. But anyway, so the question here is, was it intentional? Well, from the looks of it, and the onboard really shows a really good view of it. It definitely looked like Hamilton was up and had his wheel right about to Verstappen's door. Actually, you know what? Give me 1 second and I'm going to pull it up on the TV. All right, give me 1 second. All right, fast forwarding to where it takes place. I mean, these two were pretty much side by side and nearly touching wheels, you know, all the way through the first lap. And Leclerc's just looking on like, okay, what's going to happen here? And then they come to the old pit straight, coming down towards Cops. Hamilton makes a move. Verstappen forces him down low. Of course, that's not a very good view. How about we get the better view of the aerial shot? Okay, show Verstappen climb out. Okay, so Verstappen goes back out to the left to basically angle it into the corner, because I mean, in a corner as fast as Cop's corner is, you don't necessarily want to be on the inside going into the corner because you don't have a very good angle. But from the looks of it, Hamilton, I mean, at the point where I've got it frozen right now, this is right before they start to turn into Cop's corner. Hamilton has his front wheels basically up to what would be the door of Verstappen's car. Now, it's my understanding that if you have at least your front wheels up alongside the car you're trying to pass, you have the right to challenge for that position in the corner. At least that's how I understand it. Now, from the look of it, I'm looking at it from the point of contact now. Hold on a second, will you? Cats. So Verstappen tries to take the natural line through. Hamilton, of course, is trying to pass him on the inside. And from the looks of it, Hamilton took it into Cop's corner a little bit too hard, because the onboard showed that he had the wheel conked to the right as far as he could get it from the looks of it, and the car just did not want to turn whatsoever. Now, in stock car terms, this is referred to as a push or a tight condition, meaning that you turn the wheel in the direction you want to go, but the car wants to continue going straight. In NASCAR terms, that's considered a push or a tight condition, as opposed to the rear wheels not gripping, which would be, in this case, the back end wanting to slide out from under you, or the car wanting to spin out in this case, which would be, in NASCAR terms, referred to as a loose condition, or in open wheel terms, oversteer. But in this case, it was clearly understeer, and because Hamilton, he had the wheel conked all the way to the right, and the car just did not want to turn. And when Verstappen took the natural line, the line you're supposed to take through Cop's corner, he came down, Hamilton pushed up, and that resulted in the collision between the two. Now, there was a lot of accusations thrown Hamilton's way that, oh, it was intentional because he was losing the championship, you know, all this other shit. People, this is not like some of the championship ending collisions that we've seen like in the 80s and 90s, you know, like some of the shit that Schumacher did, or, you know, some of the scuffles that Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna did. It's nothing like that, okay? These were two guys that have been racing hard for this championship all year long. And when you have hard racing like this through an entire season, you know, eventually shit like this is going to happen. I mean, it's just inevitable. It happens in all forms of racing. Now, was the move ambitious on Hamilton's part? Yeah, you could say that. I mean, it's lap 1 of the damn Grand Prix, and they had 52 laps to go. So, can you criticize him for being too ambitious with the move? Yes, you can. Was it intentional? No. Let's be honest here. If it was intentional, you would have seen that wheel conk back to the left, and you would have, you know, and he would have intentionally turned into Verstappen. But as you can see from the onboard camera, he had that wheel conked to the right, and the car just would not turn. So I think he took it in a little too hot into Cop's corner, and the car just did not want to turn. So while I do believe that Hamilton was a bit too ambitious, I don't think it was intentional. It was not. I don't think it was intentional. And even though he did get a penalty for it, I think the stewards are like, yeah, I mean, we should give him a penalty for avoidable contact, because I think it was avoidable contact, but I think it was unintentional contact. I think Hamilton was just trying to race Verstappen hard to try to get the lead, and sometimes the line is crossed. I mean, it happens. It happens in all forms of racing. No matter, you know, whether it's in the United States, in Europe, in Australia, it doesn't matter. This type of thing is going to happen when two guys that are basically on equal ground with each other, battling for a championship, you know, racing hard with each other week after week after week after week. Eventually something like this is going to happen. It's not only expected, it's inevitable. That's just the way it is. But what was truly disgusting about the whole thing, though, was that this type of thing really brought out the worst in this fan base. And honestly, it's not even, you know, fanboyism at this point with some of these fans, these so-called fans of Formula One. At this point, it's tribalism, where, you know, you have these people that love certain things so much that when, you know, something like this happens, no matter if it's intentional or not, they're always quick to, you know, just be absolutely vitriolic about the person or entity that ended up causing the thing that they love, you know, to have a bad day or whatever the case may be. Because Hamilton, immediately after that incident and also after the race, was receiving a lot of racial abuse online on all forms of social media: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, YouTube. And it was absolutely fucking ridiculous. I mean, does Hamilton deserve some criticism for, you know, what happened here? Sure. I mean, even I will say I think it was a bit too ambitious on his part. But to resort to having to use his skin color against him, just fuck off. Just fuck off. If you're the type of person that does that stupid ass fucking bullshit, go fuck yourself, okay? That type of bullshit has no place in sports or in humanity, for that matter. I mean, why the fuck do you care so much about what a person's skin color looks like? Like, why should that be a part of the fucking conversation? I mean, that's stupid shit. You don't judge a person based on, you know, their skin color or their eye color, their sexual preference. I mean, who the fuck cares? You don't judge a person based on that. You judge a person based on who they are as a human being. Not by the fucking skin color of their skin. Whether it's black, white, gray, blue, purple, it doesn't fucking matter. None of that should even come into the equation. And if you're one of those people that does that kind of shit, fuck yourself. And that's what I gotta say about that. The craziness of this whole thing wasn't over, though. because apparently Red Bull decided to take it on themselves to file an appeal with the FIA. Because let's not forget, after this incident, of course, Verstappen fell out of the race. Hamilton was assessed a 10-second time penalty, which Red Bull and pretty much everybody in the Red Bull camp felt like, it was too light of a penalty. Now, even though it is considered the second most lenient penalty that the FIA can enforce, 10 seconds in motorsports is an eternity. Like, when you're talking about, it would be almost a death nail in NASCAR, because when you're talking about, races that can be decided by hundredths or even tenths of a second, thousands of a second, 10 seconds is an eternity. In most cases, that's a nail in the coffin to try to even get a good finish. Now, of course, because, it's Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes and they're insufferably good at what they do, they were able to recover from it. But just to give you an idea, they served the penalty, I think, like just before the halfway point of the race. It took them the entire rest of the race. It took Hamilton pretty much the entire rest of the race for him to catch back up and even be a contender for the race win. But evidently Red Bull didn't agree, so they filed an appeal with the FIA to try to get the penalty basically upgraded based on some evidence that they had. Apparently they had their reserve driver Alexander Albon do some testing, as far as, trying to recreate the incident here, as far as how Hamilton drove into the corner, which I thought was kind of strange, to try to basically have the FIA upgrade the penalty to, like, say 30 seconds added to his overall time, which would have knocked him out of the race win. Now, if you have legitimate evidence against another driver, say, hey, the penalty wasn't, harsh enough, then fine, but it almost seemed like Red Bull was trying to manufacture evidence against Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes. If Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes had done wrong, then fine, penalize them accordingly, because, I'm the type of person that doesn't give a fuck, because rules are rules, and they're supposed to be enforced the way they're supposed to be enforced. But, it almost seems like Red Bull, and I like Max Verstappen and Red Bull, and all that stuff, I want to see them do well, and honestly, this whole thing between Red Bull and Mercedes has probably been the best thing for Formula One in a long-ass time, because for the last, 7-8 years, it's pretty much been all Mercedes. Mercedes. In fact, the last 3 years, Hamilton has won in each of the last 3 years, 2018, 2019, 2020. He's won 11 races in each season the last 3 years. And the championship hasn't even been close. So this whole battle between Verstappen and Hamilton has been the kick in the ass that Formula One has needed. So I want to see these two fight it out all the way to the end for this championship, because it's been the most exciting thing in Formula One in a long ass time. But at the same time, Red Bull shouldn't be trying to manufacture evidence to try to get ahead in that championship fight. And evidently the FIA felt the same way, because they ended up rejecting Red Bull's appeal, which they should have, because it was a racing incident, nothing more. It wasn't premeditated like some of the other shit that we've seen in championship deciders. It was a racing incident. When you have two very aggressive drivers like Hamilton and Verstappen going at it for the race win, which could determine the outcome of a championship, that's just the type of stuff that's going to happen. That's just the way it is. But anyways, with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this review of the 2021 British Grand Prix. I'm just going to be completely honest here about this race. I mean, other than what happened at the beginning and the end of this race wasn't really that intriguing, folks. I mean, for the most part, the race itself was a nothing burger. But, you know, people are talking about it because of the whole, you know, Verstappen-Hamilton collision, you know, at the beginning of the race. I mean, that was basically the big talking point all week. So, there isn't going to be a whole lot to talk about in terms of this race, so let's go ahead and get into it. So, Hamilton won the pole, well, the provisional pole on Friday. But, of course, this was the first weekend for the new sprint format. Verstappen won the F1 sprint on Saturday with Hamilton second and Bottas third. So 3, 2, and 1 for the points. So going into the race, Verstappen has a 33-point advantage in the Drivers' Championship. Perez has to start from the pit lane for changing the rear wing from an accident that he suffered in the sprint race. So Verstappen starts from the pole. Hamilton immediately challenges Verstappen for the race lead, and then of course the contact between them at Copse Corner. The impact was clocked at 51 Gs, and of course we all already went into the whole thing, so no need to go through that again. So first safety car, the only one I think, on lap 1 for Verstappen's crash. So obviously huge championship implications. So we have a red flag and a full race restart. So Leclerc, who actually managed to get in front of Hamilton as he was checking up because of the whole thing. So Leclerc manages to get into the lead, and he leads on the standing start. Vettel spins at the old pit straight as the Hamilton-Verstappen incident was under investigation, obviously, and Hamilton gets hit with a 10-second time penalty for the collision with Verstappen, as the FIA deemed it to be an avoidable collision. Fair enough. Battle for 10th between Raikkonen, Gasly, and Perez heats up. Leclerc starts reporting engine issues with his Ferrari on lap 16. Apparently, there was a problem with the software in his car that controls the engine, and it was kind of, you know, cutting out at certain times. It seemed like it wasn't getting full power the whole time. It was still working pretty good as he was able to lead pretty much the entirety of the race up until the end, but there was still a pretty big concern as far as Ferrari is concerned, because it's like Leclerc is leading this race and he's reporting engine issues. Not exactly a very comfortable feeling if you're a Ferrari engineer. Gasly receives a warning flag for track limit violations. You can only get 2 of them. The third time around, you'll get a 5-second penalty. Hamilton tries to catch Leclerc. Starts trying to catch Leclerc for the race lead. Of course, he still has to do the 10-second time penalty on his pit stop. Ocon and Latifi begin the pit stop cycle on lap 20. Norris ends up with a 6-second stop after issues on the right rear. Jeez, I can't talk today. And this 6-second stop would actually cost him a podium spot. Oh, you cats. Bottas with a faster stop is able to get by Norris on the undercut. Hamilton finally pits on lap 28 and he serves his 10-second time penalty. The pit stop wasn't exactly clean either. He actually ended up with a 14-second pit stop by the end of it. Sainz ends up with a bad stop with problems on the left front wheel nut. Leclerc pits from the lead on lap 30 and comes out with the race lead. So it's looking good for him right now. Hamilton gets by Norris for third at Copse Corner on lap 31. Much cleaner this time. Evidently he learned his lesson. And Leclerc has a 9.5-second lead over Bottas at this point with 20 laps to go. Ferrari ended up reporting that the mapping software for the engine was malfunctioning, which is why the engine was cutting in and out at times. Battle for 5th between Ricciardo and Sainz. Perez pits a second time for fresh mediums. Bottas allows Hamilton by for second, so a little bit of team orders there. Not a fan of it, but I get the gist of it. Still not a fan of it. So with 10 laps to go, Leclerc has a 6.6 second lead over Hamilton. So the chase was on. And then with 5 laps to go, Hamilton was just 2 seconds back, and the crowd really started coming alive at this point because it's kind of like I had a feeling that Lewis was going to pull it off. Raikkonen spins after contact with Perez, who comes in for fresh tires to take the fastest lap away. Hamilton gets into DRS range with 3 laps to go, and then Hamilton passes Leclerc at Copse. Tries to do the same move that he did try on Verstappen, only this time he learned his lesson and stayed further to the inside. And Leclerc actually went wide at Copse. And that allowed Hamilton to take over the race lead for the first time on lap 50 for our one and only pure lead change. And Lewis Hamilton, battling through adversity and a 10-second penalty, wins his 8th British Grand Prix victory and his 99th Formula One win, which means, yes, he is just one victory away from becoming F1's first ever Centurion in race wins, which will undoubtedly be an historic moment, whether you like Hamilton or not. Charles Leclerc comes home in second. A good run for him in the Ferrari, and Valtteri Bottas comes home in third. Pretty clean run for him, which is something I needed. Didn't really have that in the next race at the Hungarian Grand Prix. I don't know if I'm going to do that review today or tomorrow. Depends on how I'm feeling. I'm actually a little bit tired, but we'll see. But so, do some race statistics real quick. Of course, the race was 52 laps, as I said. There were 2 overall lead changes and 1 pure lead change, and only 1 safety car, which was at the beginning of the race. So there you go. Alright, so race results and points, and I'm going to be using Formula One's race results, point standings, and the constructor standings pictures that they post on their Twitter feed, because they actually look really nice, as you can see. So top 10 finishers, of course Hamilton with the win, Charles Leclerc in second, Bottas in third, and then the rest of the top 10, your point scorers, Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo, both in the McLarens, in 4th and 5th, Carlos Sainz in the other Ferrari in 6th, Fernando Alonso in the Alpine in 7th, Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin in 8th, Esteban Ocon in the other Alpine in 9th. We'll be talking about him in the next race review, that much I'll tell you. And Yuki Tsunoda for AlphaTauri rounds out the top 10 and gets a point. Not bad for his rookie year, I must say. Point standings. The driver standings coming out of the British Grand Prix. Verstappen had a 33-point edge over Lewis Hamilton, more than a race. It's now down to just 8. Verstappen with 185 points. Hamilton cuts the lead to just 8 points with his win. Lando Norris and Valtteri Bottas moved by Perez into 3rd and 4th in the driver's standings. Man, Lando Norris proved himself proud in that McLaren. Bottas in 4th. Perez drops to 5th. Then you have the 2 Ferrari drivers, Leclerc and Sainz, in 6th and 7th. Daniel Ricciardo in 8th, Pierre Gasly in 9th, and Sebastian Vettel at 30 points rounds out the top 10. And then the constructor standings have also tightened up quite considerably, because Red Bull had a pretty big lead over Mercedes themselves in the constructor standings. Not anymore. The lead is 4 at this point after the British Grand Prix. Red Bull with 289, Mercedes closes it down to 285. Then you have McLaren in 3rd, Ferrari in 4th. Very tight battle for 5th between AlphaTauri, Aston Martin, and Alpine. Alfa Romeo with 2 points, and then you have Williams and Haas down at the bottom with 0 points. For Williams, anyway, that's going to change at the next race. So, a lot of big things at the next race at the Hungarian Grand Prix at the Hungaroring, which actually produced a pretty damn interesting race, despite the fact that the Hungaroring is notoriously difficult to pass on, which is kind of crazy. As for my final rating for the British Grand Prix, I mean, if you take the beginning and the end out of it, this race was pretty much a nothing burger. I mean, there was really not a whole lot to talk about during this race, other than what happened at the beginning and the end. So, you know, my final rating for this race, because the beginning and the end were just so holy shit wacky, I'll give it a 4 on the fuel gauge. I mean, that's the best I can do. I mean, like I said, other than the beginning, you know, with the whole controversy, and then the end with Hamilton running Leclerc down, I mean, the rest of the race was just a bore fest. So, that's just how I feel about that. But that is going to do it for today's edition of the Fuel. Well, this edition of the Fuel. I might do the Hungarian Grand Prix review later on today. I haven't really decided yet, or if I might save it for tomorrow. I'm not really sure at this point. Depends on how I feel. But I kind of wanted to get this one done and over with, because I've been procrastinating like a motherfucker. But at least I got this one done, and focus on the next one, which is the Hungarian Grand Prix. And there was some shenanigans in this one too. Oh my goodness, lots of shenanigans shits going on in this championship. Maybe it's a good thing that they're going into the summer break. They're going to get the next 3 weeks off, and then they got the Belgian Grand Prix at the end of August. So the NASCAR returns next week, so there's that. Coming off their little mini break due to the Olympics. And they're going to be at Watkins Glen next week. In fact, I think the next couple races are at road courses. I think they're at Indianapolis afterwards as well. Trying out the road course there. But that's going to do it for a very crazy edition of the Fuel with all this shit going on. So the Hungarian Grand Prix will be, I think, a little bit lighter as far as the news and shit is concerned. But thank you very much for watching, and until next time, this is the Packerman signing out. See you later.
Thank you for watching tonight's video. Be sure to like and subscribe, you rats!